Hi, I'm Natalie Callback. I'm here with Creative Jumpstart 2019. I'm super excited to have Danielle Donaldson with me, who's being with us for the first time. I'm super excited that she said yes. I know Danielle, of course, from her gorgeous artwork, but we also met in person, I'm not really sure, a couple of years ago when it was exactly. At an offer dinner, I think, with F&W. So
Yeah.
Danielle also wrote maybe more than one book, probably, she can tell us. So, but I give it over to Danielle in California and let her introduce herself and tell you a little bit about herself and her artwork. Hi, Danielle.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So good to see you.
I am, of course, I love that. Of course, I'm Danielle Donaldson. That's a good introduction. I'm Danielle Donaldson, and I'm in the middle of California, just kind of doing my art thing for the last year. It's been full time. I specialize in watercolor and combining that with illustration.
Hmm.
That's my jam. That's my world.
That is so cool. And I love, if you don't follow Danielle right now, I really love what she's doing. But especially right now, she's doing all these like really cool things on Instagram. So you should check her out. What's your handle on Instagram?
Danielle Donaldson, artist.
Cool. So,
That's really original, isn't it?
well, it makes
Yeah.
total sense. That's how you
Yeah.
should do it. You know, so you might not know, but so we do Creative Jumpstart for the 8th year, and every year this is no difference to all of the other years. What we do is I send out a theme to the artists. It's kind of like loose, so that you guys can, get your own juices flowing. But it's like a
Yeah.
little pocket that we can put everything together in the theme. And so this year, the theme for Creative Jumpstart, as Danielle knows, is My Home is My Castle. So, what does home mean to you?
Well, so I love being in my pajamas for the most part. If I could live in my pajamas, well, I do live in my pajamas now, well, except today. Home to me is my comfort zone. It's definitely where I'm happiest. Home to me has always been my most comfortable place, not in terms of any specific home. Like I could move to another home and make my cozy world cozy again. So I guess
Mm-hmm.
for me, it's a little bit different in that it's not that I need to be
Mm-hmm.
here, but I like to be cozy.
Mm-hmm.
I like, the familiarity of my walk from my bedroom to my office. I like not having to commute, or I think part of it for me is that I'm so visually active
Mm-hmm.
that my home is kind of like my resting place for my eyes. So I think for me, home is just um, an easy place for me
Mm-hmm.
to be. It's quiet. I have such an active mind and such an active imagination. I'm a huge what if person.
Mm-hmm.
So the more I go out into the world, the more what ifs take place. And this is just a really good place for me to say I'm in control of this little space. So that's what home is. I mean, both of my kids are grown. They live out of state. So I don't get to see them all the time. Of course, it's me and my husband. So it's just kind of my own little Danielle-ish world. It's like a cloche,
I
but
love
me,
that.
you know.
I always
So
feel like mine is like a kind of like a, I mean, I'm also Cancer as a, um, you know what I mean, stereotypic.
what's your sign?
Exactly. Thank you, Cancer. So, but I also feel like for me that's my crap house. Like
Right,
so I can be a hermit or whatever, and I can go back and can do whatever I want. I can
right.
say whatever I want. You know, it's as you said, a safe place.
Right.
So that's really
Right.
cool. Do you travel a lot, Danielle?
I don't travel a ton. I used to equate that to being more successful as
Mm-hmm.
kind of this roving teaching artist that I am. But I'm not a very good traveler. I would love to travel for me. And I
Yeah.
do travel a little bit for art, but I limit it because it's actually, I love it, but it's exhausting.
Yes.
You're in someone else's house and in
Right.
someone else's world. And um, I'm a hermit. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm a hermit. And so for me, as much as I love it, it drains me physically too
Yes.
much.
Yes.
And it takes too long to revamp.
Where do
So
you
that's
teach
what I
then?
experienced the last time.
Where are you
What?
going to teach? Tell people about it.
So I am going to teach in Barcelona and Madrid at the Scrap House in
Oh yeah.
February, late February, early March of 2019. So I'm excited about that. Someone said, are you teaching in Spanish? No, no. Like it's not hard enough to paint and talk at the same time. No, someone's going to have to sit there and do whatever they do. My daughter actually has a degree in Spanish. Maybe I should make her go. I'd be scared of what she would say, though. I think she'd be tricky.
Your daughter?
Yeah, I think she would mess with me. She would.
No. No. You're like, have you met my daughter?
I've met my daughter. Every time she comes home, she gets a hold of my phone and she changes. So every time I type the word art, it turns to meow. Every time. And I'm so old that it takes me months to remember and or figure out how to change it back. And so if you ever see me post anything on Instagram or Facebook where it says, this is my favorite new meow piece, I meant art. Yeah.
I can totally see your daughter like translating something and people go like, what?
Exactly.
So Danielle, you have in your artwork a very beautiful and soothing color palette. So I say, and so you say. So is that and I've kind of like think so, but I might be totally wrong because I'm looking at your studio and what's behind. But is that general mood of your house and decoration in your home?
Can you tell? No. I think it goes back to needing a really calm place. My house is actually pretty low key in terms of color, because it's kind of like I liken it to having adult colic.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm in a room and there's so much color and so much going on, I can't internally calm down.
Mm-hmm.
And so I found that if I surround myself with like little tidbits of color, it settles and frees my creative brain, and it basically allows me to not get stuck using specific colors over and over again in my art. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes total sense.
Yeah.
So many of your pieces, they show like little magical environments, which I love. It's so cool. It's something that I cannot really think up. Like it's not like my like in my thing. Like say what we're like. I'm like, oh, let's paint something urban, right? So. But like, so how do you dream up those worlds?
So that's a question actually that people ask me a lot. You could come and live in my brain for a little while and try to figure that out, but there's some not so good parts about that. But I think for me, when I teach my courses, I've kind of come up with this process where I kind of watched myself create and tried to come up with steps.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, the steps are study, prepare, practice, imagine. And so if you don't study what you want to paint or draw, if you don't prepare your mind and your space and have the things that you need really close at hand and where you need them, and then if you don't practice it over and over again, the imagination part, you can't get to it. Like, it's on the other side of all of that. And so many people get bored, like, with, especially the practice. Like, the study, mine is pretty fun studying. It's usually books or, you know, web searches or talking to other artists or, you know, going outside every once in a while. And then preparing for me is kind of doing, and this is kind of, you know, woo-woo as I get, that it's like that internal, have I had a bad day? Do I have a lot of, you know, it's that whole energy. Have I used up all my energy? So for those days, my practice would be practicing stuff I like to do, stuff I'm good at, right? So then I'm not failing and failing. On good days, when I get to create first thing in the morning, you know, I try something new, and sometimes it fails. Try it again. Then it gets a little bit better. And so the imagination part comes when I've done all that stuff, and I say, okay, that worked while I was practicing this little piece. I was just working on a piece before we started the interview, and I'm like, okay, I don't really like the character, but I came up with a great process for adding whites onto dark areas. So now it's like, if I take that and I apply it to bonsai trees, it's the what ifs, right? It's like, so I got really good at this. This was kind of cool. The rest of it's a hot mess. What if I apply it to something else? Right. So that's kind of how you get there. But for me, I'm like the womp womp person. I'm like, you got to do all this. That's the way the imagination part kicks in, because you just know everything else well enough that you can concentrate on the imagining.
Yeah, I agree. Part. You have to master your skills so that you don't have to think about it anymore. Otherwise, it's not like things are just falling into your lap. Like, it needs to be like very automated, like things, and then you can just let go and try new things and incorporate new things.
Right, because it's kind of like you're taking your process and saying, okay, I know my tools really well. Right. I know my colors really well. I kind of suck at the drawing part. I need to practice the drawing part. And then once you get that drawing part done, then you know they'll all work together, and you can kind of say, and usually it's as simple as saying, as a matter of fact, I'm working on a little something, maybe a new book. Yeah, that's the first time I've said that out loud. A new book where it's all about the what if. It's the imagination part, where it's like, what if we took a kitten and clouds? What if we took a globe and grass? Like, so it's like this, what if you take these different pieces? What does that look like to you? Because usually it's simply just a what if.
I'm always amazed when students, and not in a negative way, when students says, but what if I use this and that color? Or what if I would use that material instead of that material? And my answer is always like, well, try it. Because I think it's like, it's so important. It doesn't really help you if I, as a teacher, tell you what maybe the outcome is. Even if the outcome, I mean, I might know, of course, what happens what if I mix green and red? Yes, I know that. That's going to be maybe a color that you really don't want. But okay,
Right.
that's a thing that we can kind of like, you can
Right.
either learn it the hard way or we can learn about color theory, right? But then there are things
Right.
that you wanna try, and maybe the result actually pleases you. It might not please me,
Right.
but there's nothing wrong of trying that what if. Like
Right.
you will always learn and take away something.
Right.
And even if you like, I actually, it's funny because I saw that whimsical character, you posted it on Instagram and I loved it, but it doesn't matter if I love it. Like you're the
Right.
one who's doing it, and you took something away from that that's totally different from what I take away from it just looking at it but not doing it.
Right.
Right? I think that's
Right.
so important that so what do you tell students when they're like, okay, because I'm not a great watercolor, and you know what? I'm not a good watercolor artist because I haven't practiced it enough, and so it just
Right.
controls me. I know that
Right.
though. I have a lot of fun when I play with watercolor because I
Right.
just roll with it. But what
Yeah.
what are you doing when you're like teaching and people are like, but wow, what if?
Yeah. It's kind of funny because that happens a lot. And I find that, and I think a lot because you talk about my color palette. And the funny thing about my color palette is my color palette is every color.
Yeah,
It's every color.
right.
I've just mastered how to work them really well. I've mastered how do you transition from one color to the next. So what I usually tell my students to do is just put the color charts away. Because in watercolor, if you're trying to look at your color charts and you're trying to mix your colors, you miss out on all the best magic of watercolor, right? It's
Right.
gone. And people are so afraid of color in terms of what they might do wrong or that it might not come out the way that they want. So you have to kind of bridge that gap between having a picture in your head and knowing what you want it to be and allowing the watercolors to do the heavy lifting for you, right? Watercolor is really hard in the sense that it's a real division of control, like how much watercolor controls you and how much you control the watercolor. And so for me, I'm going to get woo-woo again. So for me, it has to do with when you let go of it, when you let go of control, you find out that it can be beautiful without having control. So if you're constantly trying to control everything, which at least for me, I'm a control freak, it goes back to all the what if stuff. If I'm constantly trying to manipulate and control everything, I'm always going to be disappointed.
Right.
I'm going to be disappointed in the process and myself and, the fan blowing because it dried stuff too fast. So I think that there's a point where you kind of shove aside all those color charts and say, hey, who knows if this girl character will end up with the colors I have in my head. But if I just grab colors as I go, what might happen? And it's usually, luckily with watercolor, mixing red and green, you come up with beautiful colors. I call it, in my classes, making mud. And in watercolor, the mud is the glue that holds the piece together. Because not every color can shine, right? Like, need supporting characters in your overall composition. So making mud is a good thing.
I think so too. I say that all the time too. I say, like there's so many different ways, especially, I work in acrylics, and I think it's really important to make your own neutral and brown tones using the colors that you already used.
Yeah.
Because it's more pleasing for your eye than introducing another brown, like another tube, another color, another brown, like that's fresh from the tube. And I also really like those tones, you know, in my work, because otherwise it all just looks like, you know, makes you
Right.
nuts, right? So
Right.
I don't
And they
know.
don't match right out of the tube.
Exactly. So
They don't match.
it's very
They don't.
interesting that a lot of people say that this looks ugly, but I think what it is more like it came out and they didn't want, like, it wasn't that they planned on having that color come
Right.
out. So
Right.
then that screws up anything that you had in your head.
Right. Well, and that goes back to the study, prepare, practice, right? It's like, do you have, I mean, I'll go as so far as to tell my students, you know, no one can tell you what color red is true red to you.
Right.
What is true red to you? If
Right.
that is tomato red or cherry red, don't let anyone tell you anything different than that, because it's your eyes, it's your color, it's your
Right.
story, it's your art. And so for people who don't really want to put a lot of time into learning color theory, I usually start from a point of saying, look at your palette, what is your true red? And then what's a warm red on one side of it and a cool
Mhm.
red on the other side of it. And guess what? If you hate warm reds, get rid of them.
Right.
Don't use them. Every time you use them, there will be something off in your
Right.
painting. And that's what happens a lot of times when people go through the process of copying work to become a better artist. The color gets in the way a lot because they'll look at it and they'll say, I don't understand. I don't like it. Well, if you don't like yellow,
Right.
and your girl's character dress that you're copying is in yellow, it's just going to be that little thing in the back of your head that's like, why don't I like it? Why don't I like it? Well, you don't yellow. At least from the color standpoint, for me, it's all about, like, don't let other people tell you what colors are right, wrong. You need to develop your palette based on telling your story.
Right, exactly.
Not anyone else's story. And I'm pretty, you know, off the grid in the anti-color theory thing.
Yeah.
But I think unless my students want to go and take a color theory class, I have to give them some tools so that it makes sense to them.
Right.
So that's what I try to do.
Right. Right. Danielle, it was so much fun to talk to you. Thank you for all your time. Hence, a lot of dropped calls that we had with this interview, which probably no one will notice, but it was a little bit hard for us. So thank you again. It was a pleasure talking to you. Do you want to say anything about what's coming up? You did hint a couple things already in the next couple months that you want people to sign up for or do.
Yeah. So I'm kind of winding down my year at this point, but I have I think I have 5 or 6 classes on my site, DanielleDonaldson.com right now. By far the most popular has been my Art of Bonsai, and people are asking for part 2 of Art of Bonsai. So I think I might add that. And next year, definitely keep an eye out. I'm going to call it character building. It's going to be a character building year. And so I plan to offer a lot of that imagination portion and marry it with really cute characters and see what we can come up with. And then, of course, I am traveling to Madrid and Spain.
Wow.
Madrid and Barcelona. And I am in the works for my 3rd book, which will tap into all of this awesome what if stuff, actually. So, and thank you for having me. This has been fun.
Thank you so much, Danielle. And yeah, check her out, her website. We dropped it again, but we're back on. We will finish this interview. Last little race.
Absolutely. And you know, you mentioned it in the beginning. Instagram is definitely my favorite way to communicate my process with everyone. So I would love to have everyone join me on Danielle Donaldson Artist. I'm even learning to do a story or two. It's kind of
awesome. Yeah, do that and sign up for Creative Jumpstart using Danielle's link. And yeah, thank you and see you soon.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.